News, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news now.
If you're in the city of Chattanooga, your taxes could be going up. Morris Sullivan, the chief operating officer of the city, says that due to the Improve Act being passed, cuts to two major sources of Chattanooga revenue, including a 1 cent cut off of the sales tax and the phasing out of the hall income tax by 2021, the city's now out $1.2 million this year and $5.3 over the next 3. Mayor Andy Burke recommends an increase in property taxes. Just over the Georgia border in Walker County, a 17-year-old, Sydney Bailey Berry, has gone missing. The sheriff's office, they're asking for your help to find her. She was last seen getting into a black SUV in Rossville. Cops say Jonathan Doss was spotted bleeding profusely walking on the side of the road. He was rushed to the hospital by passing motorists. The police say it may have been a heroin deal gone bad. Doss told police he met a man to buy heroin. The man's name was Tony. Police are investigating. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Expect partly to mostly cloudy skies through your afternoon. A few isolated showers and thinner showers will try to move in from the south and east. Highs 82 to 85 tonight. Muggy low 70 to 72 for Thursday and Friday. A few more widely scattered, mainly afternoon showers and storms. Highs into the 80s. McBriar Realty is now Real Living Southern Realty, serving the entire tri-state area. Find your dream home now with Real Living Southern Realty. For their complete listings and more, rlsouthernrealty.com. And I'm Swarsheen 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Ford. On Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM. This is your total information.
Good morning, Chattanooga. This is Jim McKoon, and welcome to Legal Bites. With me today is Clay Whitaker. Hey, Clay, how are you?
I'm good, Jim. How you doing?
Fine. I understand you were in court this morning. I'm glad you could make it.
It was my pleasure to be here. I wouldn't have missed it.
All right. Well, you know, for all of us out there in listener land and here at the station, you know, all we do is see information about Trump, about how his ratings are now in the cellar, about how the government's just really gone to that hot place in a handbasket. I have to be careful on the radio. And, you know, you just really start to wonder what's going on. But, you know, for those that are my age, and I'm 60, this is not the first time we've seen the government really in just an uproar. I mean, Clay, I know you're a little younger than me, so you were probably a young boy, but when Watergate came out and all the things that were going on with Richard Nixon, we had similar issues about crimes by the president and crimes by the party and all the things that were going on. Do you recall some of that?
I do, Jim, and being younger than you are, my mind's probably fresher than yours was. But in either case, I was, I believe, a third grader at the time, and I know we were remarking before we got on the air today about the attention, the kind of attention. This is back in the day, of course, before electronic communication in the form of a computer. We had televisions. We had 3 channels, and I recall that on our local channels, it really dominated the discussion, the presentation of the case and what it was about. We even stopped school for, I bet it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks, you know, to hear some of the Watergate hearings and to sort of understand what was happening. And then finally, the big moment in 1974 when President Nixon, our president, decided to step down.
Well, and, you know, for me, it was an honor. For several years, I was a partner with Howard Baker and in the practice of law. And, you know, Howard played a central role in the Watergate hearings.
Well, and, you know, I'll tell you, a lot of folks around here do recall that and recall very intensely, as you'd indicated, you know, the sort of similarity today with the turmoil, where the two, if you wanted to call it 2 parties, that's fine. But, you know, it was very distinct at the time. There was a Democratic Party. There was a Republican Party. There were not many other parties. You know, we were still dealing with the effects of communism. I think Mr. McCarthy and his activity had really kind of put us on alert about communism. So we got a call, Jim.
I think we do have a call. See if I can get this on. Yes, caller.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question about an attorney and your clients to TV. But before I do that, let me say that the crime here is the media, who were a bunch of communists, and the Democrats, who are a bunch of baby-killing communists. That's the crime.
I have felt that way about this radio station for several years.
They're not qualified to even tell their own truths. But other than that, there is no real crime except Trump wants to get rid of the lazy federal government. I'd abolish 95% of the feds if I could, because most of it's unconstitutional what they do. On top of that, I was watching Andy Byrd being interviewed by 3 of the TV stations, and when I watched it back on Channel 9, they totally misrepresented what this guy said about the new chief. He was saying, I want to work with him, I like him, I think what he's talking about is great. I watched the clip on Channel 9 that night and said, no wonder why people hate the media. So can you explain to me why attorneys don't want their clients in front of these clowns called, especially the television news media, and what that can do to taint the trial? And I'll listen on the air.
Surely, caller, we can address that.
Yeah, I mean, from the standpoint of there we go. I mean, basically, Clay, we've got a couple of positions as attorneys when we talk about media and the press talking with our clients, and when a case is active, whether it's civil or criminal. One aspect of it is the fact the rules themselves. We had a show, I guess it was probably 2 months ago, where we talked about the fact that there are rules of court that basically constrain the attorneys and the parties from going public about positions and facts and allegations are in a case. And one of the reasons for it is so that you don't prejudice the jury pool that's out there in the listening audience or in the reading audience, so that, you know, you can get a jury that hasn't formed preconceived opinions about the case because of what's been in the media. The second reason is because all you're doing is you're giving what we call free discovery to your adversary every time you or your client go in front of the media and start discussing the positions on the facts that you think you're going to be able to establish and the claims and what the other side did. And so for that reason, a lot of times you're concerned to have your client not make representations and not make statements, because those recordings are then available to cross-examine him or her later. Fair statement?
That's fair, Jim. Of course, the interest that we have also would include making sure that we didn't divulge any of this would be our ethical concern, not only that we didn't pollute the jury pool, but we also didn't disclose anything that might be ethically prevented from being disclosed as a result of our confidentiality requirements. So, you know, we've got those 3 interests. One certainly is retrospective. One might be prospective. We don't want to create evidence or allow evidence to be admitted as a result of making admissions. So any time that a person who's charged with a crime, we always have the Fifth Amendment as an issue. And we instruct our clients, don't speak about your case. Don't talk about it. It can be used as evidence against you. In civil cases, it's the same way. That can be used as evidence against you based upon an admission or certain evidentiary rules we have to take into consideration. As experts in the law, we have to advise our clients about the way the rules of evidence apply. Many of them wouldn't have that knowledge without our telling them those things.
And caller, just as Clay indicated, when we sit down in a room with our client, our communications are privileged. The problem is for the client, and most clients are not sophisticated with multiple litigations and court cases and the like. When they sit down and they hear the information we provide them, and it may be based upon an investigator we hired, it may be based upon an expert we've hired, it may be based upon our own efforts and work product, and we share with them information. Well, if they go in front of the media, all they have is a pool of knowledge, and it's hard for the client to oftentimes segregate, did it come from my lawyer, or is it something I personally knew, or is it something my next door neighbor told me about it? And so they just start talking. And oftentimes there's a real concern that they could waive privilege or waive our work product by sharing that information. So while we appreciate the fact that the public has a complete interest and a right to know about cases of interest, there has to be some controls on where that information comes from. And that's why most oftentimes attorneys will lead the press to what's in the court records because we know that that information was appropriate.
Well, that's true, Jim, and that sort of segues us back into the discussions with President Nixon. Ultimately, if you boil everything down to President Nixon, that really is what got him in trouble. The fact that he was privy to a special and secret information that he had gathered by himself and things that he had learned during the course of his presidency and with the group called CREEP, the Committee to Re-elect the President. And those guys weren't there to advise him because they were all in jail. And so when he was able to think about his own things, he tried to discover ways to cover the problem up. And when he failed to cover the problem, we'll talk about what the problem was here in just a second, that was got him in trouble. Ultimately, he had to resign as a result of obstruction of justice and the cover-up. That was the problem. You haven't even discussed what the original crime was, and that is the burglary by a group of attorneys.
Breaking into the Democratic headquarters.
They broke in. And apparently they were so bad that the burglary originally, they botched the job, didn't do a good job with planting the surveillance devices. So they had to go back and redo it. They should have hired, the CIA to do that, I guess. They're doing a better job of it. But apparently we had that discovered, and that was part of, you'll recall, the journalist Bob Woodward and some of his associates. They ultimately played a role in uncovering what was a leaker. So the leaker, called Deep Throat, sort of same situation we have today. We had a bunch of leaks, and the leaker actually, we ultimately performed a very important public service, and that is leaked information that uncovered what turned out to be a pretty seedy side of American politics. That is that the president was willing, and certain of his associates, to go far enough to record, surreptitiously spy on the opposing parties, and ultimately got in trouble for trying to cover that up, obstructing a criminal investigation, which he had to be pardoned from by President Ford, who served the remainder of his term out. So, so we were talking about how that relates to today's sort of involvement in the investigations that are ongoing. We have the similarity of having a special counsel. Robert Mueller was involved in this one. Archibald Cox, if I remember correctly, was the special counsel who refused to be denied the surreptitiously recorded conversations that then President Nixon had made in the Oval Office.
Which was amazing to me that you would record those conversations.
He didn't learn that, and that should have been something he learned. But anyway, besides that fact, he tried to cover it up by paying off the burglars, John Dean, John Ehrlichman. There's several others. All the names don't now, but in either case, that cover-up ultimately was what got him in trouble, and that's the violation of 18 U.S.C., and there's a series of these laws. It's the section 1501 et sec, and that is a combination of laws that describe how you're not supposed to tamper with certain important public functions, one of them being a criminal investigation, but it could also be things like, we've also had a trial here locally, I think, that ultimately happened with Jimmy Hoffa, where people are trying to terminate or cause a difficulty or investigate the grand jury that was involved. So it's illegal to have some sort of involvement with trying to cause a problem with the function of the grand jury.
It's tampering.
Or a petit jury. So if it's tampering, or the language in the statute is influencing or injuring an officer or juror or obstructing the proceedings of an agency. So those two laws have been used before, and so that's exactly what happened with President Nixon. So we were going to talk a little bit today about, just in terms of the way that this is proceeding. Obviously, we don't know with the two grand juries that have been impaneled, one of them being, there's another caller, Jim.
Hello, caller.
How far we've come, and now actual transcripts of the president are released, and the FBI agent releases classified information. Do you think he should be in prison, James Comey, and the rest of these leakers? I mean, we have the head of the FBI leaking classified information to the media, and then Maxine Waters says, this is okay because, this Trump is a dangerous guy, so leak. Watergate is nothing compared to what's going on to this administration. This amounts to treason. I mean, I don't know why the military shouldn't step in and just arrest them all. And there shouldn't be a coup. I think it's that bad. What's your view on that?
Well, I certainly have some concerns about the last step that you mentioned. So one of the problems with what I would consider this Never Trump group, and if you wanted to throw Antifa in there as well, or any of the groups that are against traditional American values, and I would just simply say the whole cultural Marxism, the whole progress that we've had in the last 100 years, where the groups that are associated, whether it's the Democratic Party, the Communist Party, Socialist Party, and any of the other groups, sort of taken on the mantra. And I think you can track this historically, either through the universities or through our political sort of milieu, is that you don't want to end up in a situation where you authorize violence. As soon as you enter into violence, you entered into an area where discourse no longer applies. That's what these groups really want. They love to have violence happen, whether it's through a response from the group that's under attack, that is traditional America, God, family, country, any restraint on the groups that are the other groups, the sort of so-called minorities, or the ones that have redress. They love to drag us into violence. So I would never say we need to have the government call out the armed forces. That seems to be the very last straw. And I hope that never happens in this country. So I would never do that. But just in terms of the rule of law is what we're talking about. We need to have the rule of law, whether that is controlling leakers who are violating the law and disclosing confidential protected national secrets, or whether it is at a meeting or a public protest with Antifa who decides they're going to engage in violence, and whether we have groups, NGOs like George Soros and some of these other groups, you can name them off, the ones that you've seen in the news, that promote violence. These people need to be arrested, including the groups that are promoting it, and we need to target those groups with law enforcement. That's what the rule of law is about. And until we establish the rule of law and rely upon the rule of law, we're going to have these problems.
But, you know, we haven't been applying the rule of law consistently. I mean, we look at who is the Army general who disclosed information to his girlfriend.
Oh,
and was
David Tulis.
Yeah, but, you know, he's disgraced, prosecuted, the whole bit. And yet then we've got the issues on Hillary mishandling secure information, and there's no prosecution going forward.
Well, I agree with you, Jim. And so you really do, and you always have had two classes of people. It's us and it's them. And the them are those that are in the areas that I would typically describe as blue states. Those people that are in Washington, D.C. seem to have a different rule of law applied to them than us. For instance, folks here in this area, if you're indicted by the United States and the United States Attorney's Office puts an indictment on you, you're brought before a jury of 12 and you're tried, our people here will listen to that and will assume that the government is trustworthy, that the rule of law applies. They'll put people in jail as a result of that. But what the problem is the United States Attorney takes its orders from, in this case, General Sessions, prior to that, Attorney General Lynch. You've got people like Attorney General Lynch in Washington, D.C., who every attorney in this country knows when you apply the law, you're supplied equally. Remember when she was on the tarmac and she met with the former President Clinton while then candidate Clinton was running for office?
Right.
How is it appropriate for a then sitting Attorney General to meet with the husband of the person who was then under investigation? We know that because that's what federal FBI Director Comey said. How is that appropriate? We know that ethically it's not appropriate any time for that sort of thing to occur because of what we always know is the appearance of impropriety. Yet, did anyone lose their security clearance? Did anyone get prosecuted? Did anyone lose their bar license? If you and I did that, Jim, I think that we'd be in serious trouble. We might lose our ability to make a living. But the problem is within Washington, D.C., as those people never leave, they have a different ability to, either through their connections or through money, to prevent prosecution. And I think that's a sad state of affairs. The rule of law really does not apply.
Right. And that's my point, is we're not consistent in what we're doing. And, you know, there seems to be concern that we're now going to start enforcing all the immigration laws. But why weren't we enforcing all the immigration laws?
Well, the curious thing is, and I think this is sort of the impending veil of deceit that's ongoing with the media. If you look at the actual numbers, I read the other day, President Obama actually deported more people than President Trump. I think that's because even during the Obama presidency, the numbers of people who were illegally immigrating in the United States were decreasing. They've continued to decrease under President Trump and simply don't have enough people to deport. So while there's a lot of talk and a lot of discussion about how these laws should be applied, they're not applied correctly, I don't think. But even if they were, you continually hear on the news that there's no crime in someone illegally immigrating to the United States. That is absolutely false. I can tell you day in and day out that across this country, people are prosecuted for illegal entry into this country and for illegal re-entry. It is a crime, and it is regularly punished. So, it depends on the amount of attention these ideas get, and in terms of the way that the groups that discuss them speak the truth or not. So there's a veil of dishonesty that really, I think, is ultimately one of the problems with our whole republic, not a democracy, is that people can't tell the truth, and nobody gets embarrassed by lying anymore.
Agreed. And I think a lot of it is because you can't. When was the last time you saw a perjury prosecution? They just don't happen.
They don't happen.
I mean, the judges, we all know that people have credibility issues. You see it constantly. But in civil cases, you never see a civil judge do an order of reference to the district attorney or attorney general to investigate and prosecute for the perjury that's just occurred. You don't see any cases brought on their own based upon other things in government for perjury. It's the whole approach of our society towards telling the truth, which is what our whole civil justice system is based upon, is really awash.
I would agree with you. And that, again, leads us back into Tricky Dick Nixon.
Yes, it does.
And because he had a problem being honest, but the problem with honesty in government has extended a long time. And it's one of those issues that apparently is not going to change. And that is, it's going to require some changes to our government at some point in the future. I'm not sure that it will survive in this context. And either way, we need to know that we can trust the people that are in government to tell the truth and tell us what's going on. Media has to do that. But when the media is controlled by the same people that control our politicians, large corporations, lots of money, they control the law, they control the lobby, they control the antitrust law, which used to have some teeth to it, but no longer seems effective, that we're in a position now where we have really one story being told. It's told by the media the way that they want to tell it. We don't have any access to the news unless it's alternative media. And we have to do our own investigation to determine whether even that's true.
All right, I agree with that. But now, I do want to point out that I still believe in prosecutorial discretion. I can tell you that I have benefited from prosecutorial discretion when I've been pulled over and my tag on the back of my car expired the month before and I didn't realize it. And the officer pulls me over and just suggests to me that I might want to have that renewed, and realizes that I wasn't aware of it and gives me just a warning and lets me go. I believe truly in prosecutorial discretion. And I also disagree with what you're seeing now in, for example, some of the digital news sources that are out there where you look in and you can see the booking reports, and people are brought in and booked and photographed for driving on a expired tag and a light violation. I thought, why are we pulling these citizens down to the jail, running them through the Sally Port, booking them, taking all that time for an expired tag or anything of that nature? That just does not make sense to me.
Well, Jim, you're right. So today's day and age, we've got a number of forces that are at work, many of them disparate, that work in different directions, have the same problem. So one of the problems is what I would call aggregation and prosecution. So if you say, I want to have a mandatory sentencing and a mandatory prosecution of certain classes of people, the drug laws are particularly one of them. They aggregate the big-time drug dealer and the small-time drug dealer, and there's no distinction between the two. It raises the problem of having sentences that are not uniform in that they're all extreme, and extreme doesn't take into account the differences in the different defendants. Number two, anytime you have that distinction about who gets prosecuted or not prosecuted, in particular the ones that you mentioned, people being pulled over and taken in custody for not having the vehicle registered or for some violation that is a technical violation of a local law. You come back to that same thing. Are we picking and choosing who we prosecute or not? The other part of it is, even if you don't look at it that way, is it really a pretext for something else, like we don't have enough money. You just heard earlier that we're having a shortfall in our government. One of the ways to tax people, that's an undercover way to do it, is to arrest them, take them into custody, make them pay court costs. That's evil and wrong. It plays on the people who are least able to protect themselves. So I don't want to have that happen in our government. But I would say generally local government's the best. You have the most impact locally. We're getting ready to have our break, Jim. It's been a heated discussion.
Yes, it has. I think our caller has taken us off track from where we're going, but got us into a lot of areas that hopefully are of interest to you out there in the listening public. And I know are interest to Clay and I as far as the impact that all the changes that are happening right now in our government are having. And Clay, I guess we'll end this half hour and we'll come back and talk to you after the news and we'll continue our discussion. This is Legal Bite.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM's news now.
If you're in the city of Chattanooga, your taxes could be going up. Morris Sullivan, the chief operating officer of the city, says that due to the Improve Act being passed, cuts to two major sources of Chattanooga revenue, including a 1 cent cut off of the sales tax and the phasing out of the hall income tax by 2021, the city's now out $1.2 million this year and $5.3 over the next 3. Mayor Andy Burke recommends an increase in property taxes. Just over the Georgia border in Walker County, a 17-year-old, Sydney Bailey Berry, has gone missing. The sheriff's office, they're asking for your help to find her. She was last seen getting into a black SUV in Rossville. Cops say Jonathan Doss was spotted bleeding profusely walking on the side of the road. He was rushed to the hospital by passing motorists. The police say it may have been a heroin deal gone bad. Doss told police he met a man to buy heroin. The man's name was Tony. Police are investigating. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News, now.
In-depth traffic, news, and information. Mornings on Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Expect partly to mostly cloudy skies through your afternoon. A few isolated showers and thunderstorm showers will try to move in from the south and east. Highs 82 to 85 tonight. Muggy lows 70 to 72 for Thursday and Friday. A few more widely scattered, mainly afternoon showers and storms. Highs into the 80s. McBriar Realty is now Real Living Southern Realty, serving the entire tri-state area. Find your dream home now with Real Living Southern Realty. For their complete listings and more, rlsouthernrealty.com. And I'm Sworn Sheen 12 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Orr on Nooga Radio AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
McKoon, Williams & Ashley PLLC offers a full array of legal services to meet the needs of businesses and individuals. Our attorneys represent diverse backgrounds, interests, and legal emphasis, but we share one common goal: providing the highest quality legal services to our clients through the combination of our talents, experience, and expertise. In each case, we strive to tailor those services to meet each client's specific circumstances. Business law, business organization, civil litigation, commercial litigation, conservatorship and guardian law, bankruptcy law, just to name a few. With over 188 years of combined experience, McKoon, Williams, Ashley PLLC is here to help you and your business succeed. MWALawFirm.com. That's MWALawFirm.com. Call 423-756-6400. That's 423-756-6400.
This is Thomas DeMoss with Keller Williams Realty. I am a realtor in Chattanooga. We list and sell homes, work with buyers, work with home sellers. I have been involved in real estate for over 10 years. My background is as a real estate investor. That is what I bring to the table, is that real estate investor mindset. My job is to help you sell your house for the most money, employing the best marketing strategy and walking you through what can be a rather stressful process. So we are encouraging people who are on the fence or even thought about selling their house to give us a call. There's no obligation. We're just here to kind of have a conversation, let people know what the process is like, what the market is like, what values they can expect to receive. We work with buyers as well. I also have a buyer's agent that works exclusively with my buyers because we want to give our clients as much attention as we can. My cell phone number is 423-364-0028. Our website is northriverpropertygroup.com. That's northriverpropertygroup.com. We'd love for you guys to call us.
have the best steak selection in town. The name of the business is Don's Meat Shop, and I'm Donnie Raines. Just ask for Donnie. I make over 20 different types of sausages. Most of them are great for grilling. We have the best selection, best quality. We have the hard-to-find items. Don's Meat Shop.
Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM knows your opinion is important. So call 800-8949. Agree or disagree. Call 423-800-8949. 800-8949. Nooga Radio, AM 1240, 92.7 FM, and 95.3 HD4. News, talk, sports. Nooga Radio. The Tennessee Valley's news, talk, and sports leader. Nooga Radio, AM 1240 and 92.7 FM.
Welcome back to Legal Bites. This is Jim McKoon and Clay Whitaker. And Clay, I've got to be careful. This microphone is sizzling for the last half hour. I mean, it is just hot to touch.
I'm standing back, Jim.
I'm telling you, we've got some people interested in the subject we're talking about, and that's one of the things about what's going on right now in politics. It's so divisive. The country's half and half. I mean, it's there's not anybody really in the middle.
I would agree, Jim. It's a problem. And, their feelings are out there to be seen by everyone. And that really sort of is where I wanted to go this second half, is to talk about the law and the way that the law applies to sort of the link that we have between the first half, which is the issue of what is private, why the government protects private speech, and what is public speech, and how that works. So,
right, because what do people want to do when they're venting about these issues? They go to Facebook, they go to LinkedIn, they go to Tumblr, they go to all the various issues, and they start putting down their thoughts, their feelings, their rage.
Everybody's got one, Jim.
Right. And then when that happens, and you keep them private, you've got emails where you're privately emailing friends, you're going offline on your Facebook. Is any of that protected?
Well, it is protected, and it's protected primarily through the mechanism of the type of communication it is. What I mean by that is that our laws really protect the instrument of the communication. It protects the computer and your digital identity, if that is a way to describe it.
So First Amendment is not just a protection of your right to make public statements. It's a right to maintain private statements.
Well, it is. And so our law sort of has recognized the quality, and everybody thinks, the First Amendment deals with anybody can say anything at any time, but we all know that's not necessarily true. You may not expressly realize it, but we can describe it. So we know that the first and most important speech is, of course, political speech. Right. The law recognizes that as almost inviolate, almost as a religious quality to it, that you cannot impinge on religious or on public political speech. Religious speech also has that quality. Artistic speech, slightly less. We know that it is restricted based on obscenity laws. And the famous,
know it when you see it.
You know it when you see it. The famous statement by, was it Justice Berger? I think it was, right, but I can't recall exactly. And then, of course, commercial speech follows that, and it is one of the lowest protected standards. And so I've seen
some of the advertisements. It should be.
So if you recall back in, and we're old enough, again, I refer that you're older than me, and you're able to recall that at one point in time, cigarettes were advertised on television. And then it ultimately was subsequently brought back. The smoking became unpopular. It was sort of looked down upon in regards to public health, and there were restrictions on the way that you could advertise for smoking.
Yeah.
And so
I remember Walt Garrison, sure is relaxing, just a pinch from chicken gum.
Sure. So tobacco use is a great example of how commercial speech is not free completely. It's not unfettered. It can be regulated. And so curiously, we do have the new thing. What I would think is a new thing is the use by our drug companies, Big Pharma, to advertise their product. And it seems to be rather unfettered the way that they use that. And as a result of that, of course, that leads us into our lawsuits that we've sometimes filed as a result of people being injured by these products advertised by Big Pharma without consideration for the enormous list that you usually find as a result of what you're taking.
Right, because of misrepresentations and
Sure.
warranties and the like.
So we were going to talk a little bit about, President Nixon had to use this surreptitious process to be able to use bug devices to find out what the Democratic National Convention was saying. Well, that's contrasted today with the circumstances where
the Kremlin knew what the Democrats were doing today.
They did, and what they could not have done in the past, well, that was to bug the White House. They were able to do what the White House tried to do previously, that is to get into the Democratic National Convention by using these other devices, the electronic devices we spoke about earlier. There are some laws that deal with that. Today's a curious age. Previously, the only sort of public imprint someone had was the telephone book or whatever public records you had. And so if it wasn't amalgamated into one place, you had to go find out about somebody. You would go pull their criminal history. If you wanted to find out what property they owned, you'd go down and look at the registrar's office. Not anymore. It's all in one place. You can find out, and particularly the curious thing is people don't seem to have any particular reticence about sharing their own private issues online. And so the whole culture has shifted. Now we have the culture of promotion of your identity. Mr. Zuckerberg has assured us of that, with Facebook being the primary tool, that anything and everything either you think or that you have done in your life, you want everybody to know about it, and the connections you have with other people. So what that ends up doing is permitting other people who have criminal tendencies to be able to hack into your digital identity using a protected device, that is a computer, to be able to find that out. So that's kind of what we were going to talk about this afternoon. It's a little bit different about kind of how things are today as they were in 1972.
Right. So I've been hacked. What rights are out there? How am I going to be protected?
Well, I'm going to talk primarily today about the federal protection, because I think it's the most comprehensive, although in every state there are laws that work in your favor for that. So federally, one of the things that happens is that the federal law has developed over time. Like anything else in the federal law, it has not caught up or kept up with the changes that we have in the use of technology and the way that the law would apply to that technology. So it is always sort of retrospective in the way that it looks. You try to be prospective in the law, but it's typically going to be behind the curve in terms of development. Your protection is this. Under there are two laws primarily that deal with it. One is the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and then the other one is the Wire Fraud Act. And those two particular laws deal with the way that you interface with computers and how you transmit information. Those are the two primary ones. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act deals with the access of computers by, let's say you had a hacker and the hacker wants to access the computer. It's the computer that's protected. And now it's being expanded into not only are you accessing the computer and therefore the email, so that particular portion is protected. You're also protecting the way that email may be used online. For instance, you don't have an email necessarily with Facebook, but you have the Facebook connected to your email, which gives access to it. So the law says this, primarily identifies that government and institutional computers are protected. Governmental computers, that can be either state, local, or federal. Finally, you have the computers that are associated with an institution that is financial in character, and then you have a catch-all phrase. That catch-all phrase is one that's used frequently in the law, and is if the computer has an impact on interstate commerce. And so interstate commerce simply means that, and that's under our Commerce Clause, is that the computer some way impacts the relationship between two states and the way that commerce is carried on between those two states. And so
you bought something from Amazon in Atlanta.
That, or, hey, my computer is connected to an internet service like a Wi-Fi service that has expansion of its telephone wire service or the fiber optic service across state lines. And if that's the case, even if you pay for it using a service that gets paid for over state lines, then of course you have impacted on the computer through interstate commerce, and you're protected by the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. So,
well, is that going to give me a private right of action? Can I come and hire you and file suit because of my rights have been violated?
Well, we think so. And like I say, we were talking earlier about the way the law is developing. There have been several suits that have been filed. For instance, the so-called revenge email or or Facebook revenge cases. So let's say a former enamorant or a paramour of yours. I'm not saying yours, Jim, but I mean,
I'm still trying to figure out what an enamorant is.
Watch out. Your microphone's going to burn you. It's getting so hot. So it's if you had an intimate relationship with another person that is not married to you now. And so I was saying not you, but let's just say that's a common scenario in today's dating scene. You learn very important things about this person during your confidential and intimate relationship with them. One of the things you learn is how to get into their Facebook. You know what their online access is. And so let's say you have a terrible breakup, things go badly, and you get mad. That person said and done some things to you that you believe they deserve to have some punishment. And your idea is that you're going to use their Facebook identity to get back at them. And you're going to get online and you're going to say some mean things about them. Well, by doing that, what you've ended up doing is entering into a protected computer. Let's say that you go online, you get on their Facebook, you send out a bunch of false information about them online, and you damage their reputation. That reputation gets damaged to the point where they lose their job. They may have some other problems that result from it. What if they got divorced because they believed that there was some sort of affair that had occurred or something else that occurred that was a drastic change in their circumstances? Well, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act allows for sort of a federal online defamation suit, which you might be able to recover your damages. And this is sort of occurring right now. There are lawsuits that are ongoing. Still haven't got the complete answer back, but the answer to the question is certainly the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act gives a private civil right of action, and we believe it expands to that sort of scenario that I described to you.
So basically, it tags the rights under the computer with the common law right of privacy.
I think it does.
Right, because under the common law, before we even had computers, we had invasion of privacy claims. We had slander and libel claims that were out there already, back even when we were using abacuses. And I'll teach you how to use one of those one day, young man. But so we've always had this type of a theory in the law. But now with people able to go online and defaming us and possibly exposing things such as the sexting photos, where the sexting photos are published because of an amorous relationship. The young couple shares things that probably they shouldn't have. And then after the breakup, he begins, maybe showing it to all his fraternity brothers and then decides to post it, or one of the brothers decide to post it online. And once that's out there and in the web, it's out there forever.
Unfortunately, I think that's true. And so that's a word to the wise. Don't take those kinds of pictures. Attorneys, in one sense, love Facebook and the social media because it gives endless information that we can use either in the defense of cases that we frequently find ourselves in, or as we see now, it's creating new causes of action, new ways for us to assist people and help them when their information gets out publicly or when their reputation's damaged.
Clay, we've been doing this now for about 45 minutes today, and I haven't told the people out there how they can reach you. How can you be reached if someone had a question?
Well, we got carried away, Jim. It was such a hot topic. It's 756-6400, the McKoon, Williams, Ashley, and Stanley Law Firm. My name's Clay Whitaker. This is Jim McKoon. We're now hosting the show. If you want to give us a call at that number, that's our law firm. We'll talk to you about any of these issues. If you believe that you've been injured as a result of the situation or the scenario we've described, we'd love to talk to you about that. There are other ways that computer crimes can be prosecuted and defended. We do all of those things, don't we, Jim?
We do. And if you just want to call with your questions, we certainly will take your calls here at the radio station. The number here is 423-800-8949. That's 423-800-8949.
Yeah, I guess we got carried away, didn't we, Jim? We didn't even mention that.
Yeah, we've been so busy, and I'm telling you, the caller at the beginning of the half hour, he just wore us out and took us down some roads, rabbit trails we didn't even contemplate.
That's true. We were going to talk a little bit about United States versus Cornell, which is
that's the young student up in Knoxville.
Right. So those that are paying attention to the political discourse in the country would recall that a young man who actually his father was apparently involved in the political process himself, decided to hack into Sarah Palin's email account during the 2008 presidential campaign. And for that, he got punished. And he was punished under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, under the Wire Fraud Act. which both of them allow for prosecution for accessing a protected device, that being the computer in this case. The problem for him is the laws define protect property. So the property that he was accused of taking was the email identity and the access to the email account. So he accessed the account, he changed the passwords, he did some other things when he was online. Consequently, those have been defined as property, or the people have a property interest in those in federal law, and he got punished for it.
Yep. And again, that goes back to the prior half hour about, whether or not we fairly and equally prosecute crimes
That's
in this
true.
country. I mean, that young man really got tattooed.
He did.
And
they made an example out of it.
They did. And like I said, there's other people that seem to be walking for similar violations, but that's my own cross to bear.
It is who you know. And so in this case, I think that you're right, that just in terms of his sets of circumstances, do feel sorry for him. His life probably never be the same. Hopefully he overcomes that temporary lapse in good judgment.
And two statutes you're talking about with respect to trying to protect the privacy and the rights to your computer and your media and your choices of communication and what you're saying, the actual content of your communication. It goes back a long ways, but our society is so much different today than it used to be. I can remember a case where there was a prop plane hit the top of the Empire State Building. There were some injuries. The building wasn't that damaged, but there were injuries. And there was a young submarine sailor that made, I think the total was over 60 trips up and down the stairs of the Empire State Building, purely on adrenaline. This is like 1948. Saving lives, carrying people who could not walk, assisting people, and getting them down and out of the building. And his identity was discovered in the course by the media, and he was put in the front headlines and that kind of stuff. Well, it caused him a lot of grief on the submarine where he was serving, being portrayed as a Superman, and people ribbing him in that closed environment while he served. And he ended up suing the press over being outed as the hero. Now, you would think, that they would be something in today's lives. You want your son in the newspaper, you want everybody to get a trophy, and you want all this notoriety. And what's the basketball player's term? Branding. I want to be branded. Well, our society, at least in 1948, it wasn't such a cool thing to be out there. And he ended up suing, and what he was able to establish is that he was not a public figure. And so he proceeded on pursuing a claim for the damages due to the embarrassment and humiliation he suffered.
Jim, that brings to mind Thomas Jefferson, who had said that if you want to have a well-functioning democracy, you've got to have people who have high moral character to do it. Previous generations looked at that sort of public attention askance, didn't want that public attention. Now we can't wait to show ourselves off. And you got to wonder if we get the government that we deserve, or the one that we're, or at least maybe not deserve, at least the one that the circumstances demand. And that is one that where the president, and I don't fault President Trump for trying to combat what his perceptions are with regard to the media, but maybe tweeting so much, and the way that he tweets is not such a good plan, but he is the president.
Yep.
And I'm just a local lawyer.
That's it. So from the standpoint of state law, can you use anything in state law that would be similar to the federal wiretap and the federal statutes protecting computer information?
Yeah, Jim. Just so you know, we're licensed in Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. So with regards to the local laws in those states, there are computer protection laws that protect the device and that protect your identity. I don't know of any of them that have private rights of actions. I've not filed any. That doesn't mean they don't exist. Just like any other lawyer would do. If that were an issue and someone believed that they had a state claim, we would investigate it, try to make that claim for them if it does exist. I can't tell you that it does at this time, but we do know that there's criminal liability for the actions that we've described, and that is trying to take someone's property, that is their online digital identity, hack into it, damage it in some fashion.
Right. And I think where the big claim goes, even if you don't have private rights of action under the state criminal protections, for computer data. I think where you've got an invasion of privacy claim.
You do. We can always go back and rely upon our standard common law claims, like you've indicated, whether that's defamation, slander, those sorts of claims, right. Which, the old law still works pretty good. Even though you may have these new changes, it doesn't relieve the persons who are involved from the obligation to behave themselves and act with due care.
Right. And that's where, from the standpoint, if you really have some data that you want to protect, you have to take steps to protect it. Business has been that way for years. In business, if you had copyrighted information or if you had trademarks or if you had patents, you were obligated by the law to protect that information, to protect that secret formula, to protect how you drew something or how it was created. And if you didn't take appropriate steps to treat it as confidential, then the law wasn't going to treat it as confidential when someone else took it. So business has for years been in that situation where it's had to do those things. Well, likewise, we as individuals, now that we're out there in the media and we're on Facebook and LinkedIn and everywhere else, if you put data out there, you can't expect to be heard if you complain that someone took that data and used it against you. You've got to be circumspect in what you want people to know and who you want to know that information. And so for that reason, please be careful. And if there are any questions, please give Clay or I a call at the office, 756-6400. Well, that's another wrap-up of Legal Bites. I hope you've enjoyed the show today. Clay, thank you so much for participating with us.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
And we'll talk to you next Wednesday.